Robots Radio presents...
Hi there, and welcome to the Hidden Pixels podcast, a show highlighting those gaming stories you might have missed on your first playthrough. I'm your host, Sebastian Azaro. On this episode, we'll trek back to Tamriel with a look at a story from the Elder Scrolls Morrowind. If you don't remember, the Elder Scrolls universe is filled with all sorts of fantasy creatures, from elves to men to beasts. Today's story focuses in on the player character, a man known as the Redguard, and his adventures in the region called Vvardenfell. Along the way, he'll meet goblin-like orcs, lizard men known as Argonians, cat people known as Khajiit, and Dunmer, or Dark Elves. If that's a lot of strange and confusing names, don't worry too much. All you need to know is that the Dunmer and the orcs have legalized slavery of the cat-like Khajiit and lizard-like Argonians in this part of the world. And the Redguard? Well, he has an issue with that. So let's dive in. Redguard stood on the shore of the bitter coast, rain soaking his cloak and hood. He stood facing a craggy hillside, rivets of mud flowing down past him and into the sea. In the hill, a cave loomed like a gaping mouth. The darkness of the cave made the Redguard on edge, but he gripped his iron sword a little tighter in resolve. He heard rumors about this cave, Taurus. Dark rumors about what it is used for. It took a lot of searching to find it, to learn of the secret of the cave, but the Redguard had persisted, finally discovering the truth. He just hoped he wasn't too late. He crept silently into the cavern, hearing mumbling voices coming from the back. As his eyes adjusted, he could make out 5 shadowy figures along the back wall. The Redguard continued cautiously, making out that one of the figures was arguing with the others. So that's my man, the Redguard thought to himself. He continued to creep towards the one figure until he was right next to him. The Redguard slowly raised his sword, and then... Fork! He bashed the hilt right against the figure's head. The shadowy figure crumpled in a pile on the ground. The Redguard could now see that he was the orc he was looking for, Yatur Shrak, a slaver. The Redguard spit on the body before turning to the others in the cave. As expected, there were 4 Argonians. Their people were often found in captivity here in Vvardenfell, but that didn't make it any more acceptable to the Redguard. Where he was from, slavery wasn't tolerated, and he wasn't about to sit around and let it happen here either. He didn't care if it was legal. It was just wrong. The Redguard started searching the cavern, while the 4 Argonians looked on with interest. Finally, he found it, a small key in the corner of the cave. He got up and dusted himself off, striding over to the first Argonian. She slightly drew back as he neared. It wants something. What does it ask? But when she saw the key in his hand, her attitude changed. A flicker of hope dashed in her eyes. Do you have the key to these bracers? Will you let me go free? The Redguard nodded, and the Argonian let out as much of a smile as her features allowed. She raised the bracers to the Redguard for him to release. You have the key. Will you let me go free? The Redguard also smiled, unlocking the slave's bracers. The Argonian felt her wrists as the realization poured over her. Yes, Kishni is free. You are a good friend of Kishni. She stood there in awe as the Redguard freed the other 3 slaves in turn. This was what made it all worth it. The sleeping in ditches and trailing despicable characters. The searching and traversing all over this forsaken island. This moment of impending freedom is why the Redguard had taken up this task. These 4 made it 22 total. 22 lives renewed. The Redguard turned to leave when Kishni stopped him. You freed us! Are you in the Twin Lamps? The Redguard stopped in his tracks, confused. You do not know? Kishni was sure. But you should be a member. If Kishni asks, have you seen the Twin Lamps? You say, they light the way to freedom. She then nodded, believing that the Redguard fully understood. He nodded back, still confused, but left the cave. The twin lamps? I should be a member? It seemed like his searching had him crossing paths with some sort of secret society. He chuckled to himself as he slopped out of the cave and down the slope of the bitter coast. Vvardenfell, you never stop surprising, do you? The Redguard continued his mission without much more thought to the Argonians or the secret societies. His travels brought him all over the island of Vvardenfell, from Tel Mora in the northern Grazelands down to Vivec City and its multitude of waterways. In fact, it was in Vivec City where he met Ilmeni Dren of House Hilalu. She was the daughter of the head of the house, and mysterious in her own right. Calm and poised, the Redguard was instantly intrigued by the Dunmer, completing various tasks for her across the land. They quickly got to know each other, but the Redguard always felt like there was something just a little off about her, like she was keeping some sort of secret from him. After each task was completed, the Redguard would return to St. Delin Canton and bring Ilmeni the news. On this particular occasion, though, she seemed a little withdrawn. You flatter me with your attention, Outlander. The Redguard bowed. So do we have any other business? Ilmeni paused, as though she was discussing something. She gazed into the fire, not looking towards the Redguard. Her attitude hardened. The real business in Vvardenfell is slavery. The Redguard froze where he was. Ilmeni's stare never moved from the fire, but they both knew that the conversation had suddenly stepped onto fragile grounds, like ice cracking beneath their feet. Of course it would come to this. House Hilalu owned the most slaves on Vvardenfell, and while Ilmeni had never brought up the topic before, the Redguard knew that his track record would force this discussion eventually. She must have found out. The Redguard took a step towards the door. Maybe he could make a run for it. Yeah, about slavery. Ilmeni finally broke her stare and turned to him. Oh, have you seen the twin lamps? The tension broke into confusion. The twin lamps? That secret society he heard about way back on the bitter coast? He wasn't sure what was going on, but at least he knew what to say next. They light the way to freedom. Ilmeni physically relaxed, walking over to the Redguard with a big smile on her face. I am always glad to meet another member. It was clicking into place. She was an abolitionist, a part of the twin lamps. Hiding it from her family, she was nervous to disclose that fact to the Redguard. He couldn't blame her, being born into a pro-slavery family like House Hilalu and all. She got right to business. There is a family in Ald Velothi, the Arvels, who need our help. Go to Ald Velothi and speak to Galen Arvel. She practically shoved him out the door, still nervous now that her secret was out in the open. Standing outside St. Delin Canton, he couldn't believe that he was now a member of the Twin Lamps. He was going to make a difference in this fight against slavery. The journey was long. Gondolas through the foreign quarter, a ship to Sedanin, a caravan to Nisus, and then hoofing it on foot all the way to Ald Velothi. The Redguard was tired when he arrived, but the sight of the village lifted his spirits. It was a very small fishing town, with only a few huts scattered among the hills. There were a few docks along the coast, and some of the villagers were milling around town. The Redguard immediately set out to find Galen Arvel, but he didn't have to search for long. He found the Dunmer at the end of the docks, next to a massive ship. She was waiting anxiously by the gangplank, as if waiting for someone. When he approached, her nervousness broke into a chuckle. I don't believe I've seen a Redguard with such a grand outfit in some time. Can I help you? The Redguard hesitated, not really knowing how to put it. Here to talk about slavery and, The twin lamps? Garen was caught off guard. You know about the twin lamps? Well then, yes, we are having some trouble here. Her eyes flittered back and forth, ensuring that they were alone on the dock. A Khajiit slave, Jasada, was supposed to come meet us on our boat. He sent us a message that he is hiding in some ruins east of here. But there are 3 slave hunters in town, and we cannot risk being discovered. Distress stretched this last sentence thin on her voice, as though she were in a mild panic. The Red Guard remained calm. Tell me about these slave hunters. Yes, the slave hunters are Anes Halaran, Garen Sirith, and Sadal Doran. They have been patrolling in town and by the docks since they heard of Jasada's escape. You will have to get rid of them or avoid being seen. She then grabbed him by the crook of his arm. Remember, it is Jasada that they are looking for, not you. The Red Guard realized that this would be harder than he first imagined. The whole town could be seen from one of the hilltops, and there were only about 12 or so Dunmer around. A Khajiit and a Red Guard hightailing it to the docks may look pretty suspicious. The Red Guard thanked Garen and started walking the town, trying to think of a plan. He rounded a corner and nearly bumped into someone. It was another Dunmer, with a pale complexion. Hey, I'm looking for a friend. He's a Khajiit, goes by the name of Jasada. The dark elf had a slightly menacing look. The Red Guard had a hard time believing that he had any Khajiit friends. He feigned ignorance. Jasada? The elf looked exhausted, probably tired of searching. Yes, if you see him, please tell me where he is. He started to walk away, when suddenly the Red Guard got an idea. Oh, he left town. No idea where he was headed, though. Nope. Wow, a real silver tongue there. Super high deception skill. The slave hunter turned around, staring at the Red Guard menacingly. No idea where he went? He stepped closer and closer to the Red Guard, whose hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword. And then, the Dunmer let out a sigh. Damn, he's probably halfway to the mainland by now. He shook his head and looked off to the distance. Thanks. I'd best start looking for the next slave on my list then. And shockingly, he started walking to the town's outskirts. It worked. That terrible lie worked. The Red Guard took a moment to appreciate his luck. Well, if one could be fooled, maybe the others could as well. The Red Guard set off to find the other 2 slave hunters, hoping that this would work.
Have you ever wondered how deep the Elder Scrolls lore rabbit hole goes? Have you got a grasp of the basics and want to find out more about the universe? Written in Uncertainty is here to help you. We'll be mixing in philosophy, theology, and whatever other theory is useful with Elder Scrolls texts to untangle some of the biggest questions in the series, like what are dragon breaks, how does Chim work, where did the Dwemer go, and more. Check us out at writteninuncertainty.com or find Written in Uncertainty on any podcatcher. Thanks for listening, and catch you later in the Grey Maybe of Tamriel.
The other 2 slave hunters weren't hard to find. The Red Guard just looked for the ugliest, meanest-looking Dunmer in the village. All he had to do was walk by them, and they would flag him down, asking questions about the dirty Khajiit, and declaring that they'd make sure the slave never walks again. You know, normal slave hunter things. The Red Guard told the same lie to both of them, as he did with the first. The slave left town. Soon, all 3 slave hunters were headed out of the village, and the path was clear to bring Jasada to the ship. Galen had told the Redguard that Jasada was holed up in some ruins east of the village. He started to make his way, finding a path eastward into the hills. It didn't take long to find the ruined shrine. Apparently these were some former worshipping place to Morag Ball, but now they were not much more than crumbling rocks. The Redguard drew his sword and cautiously walked up the stone steps. He entered the first courtyard silently, eyes searching for the Khajiit. He got halfway across the room when he heard a cough from behind him. Spinning around, he lowered his sword as a cat-like figure walked out of the shadows. This had to be his man. His cat. His... whatever. Did the elves send you? Jasada's eyes looked tired but hopeful. Jasada will travel together with you back to Galen Avel's ship. He looks thin and slightly sickly. The Redguard wondered if he would even make the short trip back to the village. But they had no choice. Yeah, okay. Let's travel together. Jasada still hesitated. If slave hunters are there, they will see Jasada and kill Jasada. You sure you want Jasada to follow? The Redguard was much more confident in his answer this time. Yes, follow me. The Khajiit was still visibly nervous, but agreed. Jasada follows. Watch out for the slave hunters. The two then made their way back down the stone stairs and towards the city, as quickly and as quietly as they could. The Redguard and the Khajiit were crouched low behind some boxes. They were on the outskirts of town, mere minutes away from the ship, but there was a snag in their plans. The slave hunters. Even though the Redguard told them that Jasada had left town, and even though they said they were going to move on, they were still here. Just on the town line, they stood in a group, biding their time. It didn't seem like they were going anywhere soon, either. This was going to be a bit more dangerous than the Redguard planned. He looked over his shoulder at Jasada, who was shaking slightly. They had to risk it. They had to sneak by in order to get to Galen. The three hunters were about 100 feet away, hanging out in the shadows of a building, but their backs were towards the Redguard. Now's their chance. Sticking to the shadows on this side of the street, the Redguard quickly and quietly scurried in the direction of the docks. Jasada was right behind him. They moved from box to box on the street, hidden from the trio. The plan worked perfectly, except for one hiccup. At the last box before the docks, the Redguard stumbled a bit on some loose stones. One of the slave hunters started to turn around, arching his head to see what made the noise. But luckily the other two pulled him back into their conversation, boisterously laughing at some crude joke about an Argonian and a sheep. The Redguard breathed a little easier and turned onto the dock. He could see Galen at the end and hurried to her. She looked surprised that he was back so soon. Is there something I can do for you, Outlander? The Redguard motioned to the Khajiit, who appeared from behind the last section of boxes. Jasada. Galen smiled as she looked up and down the dock. Thank you for bringing him here. He will have a better life in his native land. She started to guide Jasada onto the ship. You should report back to Ilmeni Dren that the slave has arrived safely. As the Khajiit passed the Redguard, he stopped. Jasada is here now. Jasada is safe. Galen will protect Jasada. The Redguard put a hand on the newly freed Khajiit's shoulder for a moment before Galen hurried him onto the ship. The Redguard had done it. Once again, he brought some good back into this world. And with that, the shackles of slavery became a little looser in Vvardenfell. St. Dellen's Canton and saw Ilmeni Dren staring right at him. She looked stern and determined, but there was a hint of happiness in her eyes, and her voice was a bit softer when she spoke. I heard you helped the Arvel family. When you have time, speak with me again, for there is still much work to be done. Of course there was. Slavery wasn't abolished just yet, and that means the Red Guard had to soldier on, to keep fighting the important fight, to fulfill the mission of the Twin Lamps. The world of Tamriel is one of living and breathing character. Not only do different races exist and interact with each other throughout the game, but they act and react in a holistically realized world. Motivations, desires, strategies, beliefs. Each character you meet has an entire system making up who they are within the game world. Each system is fleshed out, making the political factions, warring houses, and religious cults all that much more believable. Take the issue of slavery here. At the time of the game, the institution is outlawed throughout most of the land except for Morrowind. Because of their historic reliance on the practice, the Dunmer who reside there continue to practice slavery, specifically of the Khajiit and Argonian peoples. Slavery is literally protected by law in Morrowind. But you, as the player, don't need to accept this reality. You can free every slave you meet, leading you down the path shown in today's story. And the game reacts in turn, not allowing you to access the Twin Lamps unless you've proven your commitment to abolitionism. It's this system of action and reaction that make the Elder Scrolls games amazing sandboxes that allow you to push the boundaries of what's possible. Speaking of the series, Skyrim just won as the best Bethesda game in a bracket on the Robots Radio Discord. If you're not part of that community, click the link in the show notes to connect with a ton of other Elder Scrolls and Fallout fans. And if you want to take part in other brackets or tournaments like the one that we just run on the Discord, join up on the Hidden Pixels Patreon, where we're running weekly brackets on various topics. It could be Super Smash mains, or Zelda dungeons, or Fallout factions. Click the link in the show notes and join at as little as $1 a month to get in on the action. Next, I want to thank Crash Chords for the amazing review on Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate the kind words. If you want to support the show, leave us a review on whatever podcatcher you listen on. It really helps expand the reach of the show and shares it with that many more people. And if you need anything else, you have a story idea, you have anything at all, or you just want to talk, feel free to reach out. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, or at hiddenpixelspodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you all. Alright, that's all for this episode. Next time, we're diving deep beneath the earth to the world of Undertale. Just the thought fills me with determination. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. This episode of the Hidden Pixels podcast was written, recorded, and produced by me, Sebastian Azaro. All episode music information can be found in the show notes or on our website, hiddenpixelspodcast.com. If you like what you heard, please consider showing your support on our Patreon page at patreon.com/hiddenpixelspodcast. Every bit helps to continue to share these hidden stories. And if you like what you heard, or even if you didn't, please rate and review the show on any major podcast streaming platform. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Hidden Pixels Podcast, or on our Discord channel where we're continuing the stories after the story. Links to all are in our show notes as well. And as always, thanks for listening.
Should introduce myself. I'm Corin Black, a humble half-demon, and folks around Baltimore call me the Devil's Runt. Here we go, finally moving again.
How do you feel about methamphetamines? You know, devil's blood don't make you a devil.
Under the Shroud. Fantasy, noir, and horror from Baltimore's sin-soaked streets. Find creator Ian Humphrey on Twitter at @FictionalIan.